Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
I have a confession to make. I spent a lot of years dissing my old high school. It seemed justified to me at the time because I felt like I was at a disadvantage when I got to college. I have a degree in engineering, and when I got to college, I only had a half year of pre-calc, and a lot of my peers had like a full year of pre-calc, and then a lot of them even an additional year of calculus on top of that. And it wasn't just in that one subject, but that subject is a great example. In a lot of ways, I felt unprepared relative to my classmates when I got to college. And I did well, but I always kind of felt like it was in spite of my high school and that I would have been even more successful if I had come into college better prepared. And so preparing my kids was really important to me. Like having them attend a really good school was a priority in our family. And so when we moved back to Michigan a couple of years ago, we didn't even consider houses in towns that didn't have good schools. And in fact, if you want to know the math or English proficiency rate of any school in my area, I can tell you, and I can tell you where to find it. But it turns out that I was on the wrong track, that my school might have actually been doing me a favor. Research that's been around since the 90s, so that's roughly my era, shows that kids at the good schools, picture air quotes here, and I'm going to tell you what they mean by good schools. But those good schools have relatively poor adult outcomes, both in terms of things like happiness and substance abuse, and in terms of things like job income, job prestige. So kind of both like internal and external outcomes. So the schools that I was longing to have gone to, the ones that I was seeking out for my kids, wouldn't have made me more successful or happier. And they actually increased my potential for problems in a couple of areas. And so I'm going to tell you 3 scary things. We're going to talk about some things that are happening at our high-performing high schools. And high-performing high schools are typically seen as schools with high test scores, varied extracurriculars, varied course offerings. Those are the schools that have lots of APs or IBs. They have dual enrollment. There's lots of programs to challenge a variety of students. And typically they're seen as schools where a high percentage of them continue on to a 4-year school, and especially certain kinds of highly selective 4-year schools. Okay, those are what we're talking about when we're talking about high-performing high schools. So hang with me through the scary things, because then I'm going to tell you what you can do to mitigate the effects of those schools. And I want you to hang with me even if your kids are not at those high-performing high schools, because the pressures that we're going to talk about, the things that they're seeing in great numbers at the high-performing high schools, they're also happening at other schools as well. It's just the concentration, like the number of outcomes that they're negative outcomes that they're seeing, that we're going to focus on. Okay, but you can take advantage of the good parts of this episode, even if your child is not at a high-performing high school. So the first thing that I think is really interesting when I dug into the research, like this whole thing kicked off with a great Washington Post article, and then I went on another research bender. And one of the things that I saw that really surprised me is that kids at high-performing high schools, I was chuckling not at the scary thing, but at the fact that I went on another research bender. Kids at high-performing high schools are just as likely to commit a crime as in low-income school districts. That blew my mind. Kids at high-performing high schools are just as likely, the actual number of crimes committed at high-performing high schools is very similar to low income schools, it's the kind of crime that's different. Okay, they're more likely to be property crimes like stealing from another parent or minor in possession crimes versus self-defense or weapons-related crimes. But the actual number of crimes is similar. So I took a look at, why hadn't I heard that before? And the biggest difference, the research says, is because there's a general tendency of kids at high-performing high schools to have parents that can and want to bail them out. They don't want that minor possession, that DUI to ruin their lives. And there's really extreme examples. Do you remember that Stanford swimmer that was convicted of attempted rape? And his lawyer went and tried to get that overturned. And his lawyer's argument, in the popular press, is this shouldn't ruin this kid's life. Those kind of arguments are much more prevalent at high-performing high schools. Okay, those crimes are very often excused as kids being kids than they are at low-income schools. And so that's why we don't hear about them. The second thing that high-performing high schools showed, this is a 2018 study, that the level of cigarette usage, alcohol, marijuana, and hard drugs are higher at high-performing high schools than at low-income high schools. And the group with the lowest level of substance abstinence, which is a fancy way of saying that they've never drank alcohol, smoke, or done drugs, is high socioeconomic status girls. Take that in for a second. The very situations that we're putting our girls in, the parents have worked hard and sacrificed and moved to these communities so that they can give their kids the very best. Those are the communities that have the lowest level of substance abstinence among girls. The reason that they say that this is true is because in those affluent communities, people can afford to share. You don't have to BYO. You can go to parties and people provide alcohol to young women and drugs and other things. So kids are more likely to have tried it just because there's more money, there's more substances available. And it's really scary because the studies show that the kids don't just get drunk in high school or high in high school, that if you drink in high school, your incidences of drinking, the gap between kids that don't drink or only drink a little versus the kids that drink a lot in high school, that gap widens in college. So if your child has a little alcohol problem in high school, they're likely to have a much bigger alcohol problem in college. That extends even after college. The studies I read went through the late 20s, and it showed that kids at high-performing high schools are 2 to 3 times more likely to be addicted than the national average. This isn't even compared to the low income, it's then the national average. They are higher than low income schools, but I just think it's really telling that even more than the national average. The third scary area is, and this is the one perhaps that we're already most aware of, is the high levels of clinical anxiety and depression, way above the national norm. And it makes me so sad because, parents have sacrificed to get their kids into these schools because they think these schools are their child's best shot at the future. Parents come to me and they ask, why is this happening? I've given them every opportunity. And the reason why is because the competition is so intense. And the kids are told that they're having a good life. They're being able to have for themselves the life that their parents are providing for them is dependent on their acceptance, not just to college, but to certain kinds of college. And in order to get into that highly selective college, that's dependent on them beating out all of their peers, not just being their own personal best, but being better than their peers who who are also getting that same message and competing right back. And the crazy thing is that being smart, like even the students who are like naturally academically gifted, that doesn't protect you from the struggle. The data shows that high GPA and SAT scores coexist with alarmingly high rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and substance abuse. Okay, because it isn't really about just being a good student. It's the idea that whatever you're doing, there's always someone out there that's better at you. Oh, you're good at calculus? Well, they're good at calculus and they're a lacrosse star. Well, you're good at those two things? Well, there's a student that's doing both of those and they're good at community service. And on and on and on it goes. And that pressure is multiplied because the pressure isn't just coming from one source, right? Like the kids know that they're competing against each other in colleges' minds and in their parents' minds. So there's peer expectations. There's comparing yourself and competing against your friends. And then there's parent expectations and there's school administrator expectations, right? Because they're graded on how well the school's test scores are. And there's coaches that are being pressured to win. And you don't just want to be on the regular team, you want to be on the elite team and you want to make varsity as a freshman. And it like the pressure is so pervasive. Again, I'm laughing because I think this is so crazy. Even real estate agents pressure the schools because real estate agents see the correlation between school stores and home prices. Okay, that's how pervasive the pressure cooker is that our students live in. Okay, all of that is hella depressing, right? Like I hesitated to even talk about all of those things because I'm laughing because when I talked about this to my friends, they just shook their heads and poured themselves a glass of wine and said, Allie, what am I supposed to do with that? Am I supposed to sell my house and move to a shack in the woods? Like, what are you telling me? And this is where the good news comes in. You can have the benefits of these good schools, the great class offerings, the caring, well-paid teachers, the diverse extracurriculars, all of the good stuff without increasing the likelihood of the bad parts. And this is my favorite part. And the reason that I hope you've stayed with me. The number one thing that research shows that affects student outcomes is parents' mental health. Take that in for a second. I think that's so beautiful. Your expectations, your love, your influence can outweigh all of the other stuff. It can act like a vaccine. If you don't buy into the winner-take-all competition idea, your kids won't. If you believe that there are multiple paths to success, your kids will. If you don't prioritize achievement over character, your kids won't. And in no way am I saying that it's the parents' fault that kids have these expectations. I just listed, it's everyone from school administrators to coaches to real estate agents. But you as a parent have so much influence, even though you might not think that you do, that your love, your expectations, your priorities, your values, and the way that you communicate all of that, that can outweigh all of the other sources out there. I love this quote from Sunaya Luther, who is my research crush right now. I love her work so much. She wrote, "A review of accumulated evidence across at-risk circumstances." Okay, and our children in high-performing high schools are now classified as at risk. Okay, they are officially clinically classified according to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Like there's a bunch of researchers that clinically classify these excessive pressure environments that our kids are going to school in as at risk. Okay, up there with poverty and racism is excessive pressure. let me start the quote again. A review of accumulated evidence across at-risk circumstances has shown that the single most important priority is to ensure the psychological well-being of adults who are taking care of these children. So in order to get the benefits of high-achieving high schools without the bad parts, the best thing for parents to do is to prioritize their own psychological well-being. Take that in for a second, because I think that's amazing good news. We have the power to change our teens' future, to change their outcomes by prioritizing our well-being. Do you know how many things as a parent, like the power to make things better for them means making things worse for myself? Right? Paying for college means maybe not going to Costa Rica. Okay? That's not true. I'm totally still going to Costa Rica. But you know what I mean. Like, so many of the things that we think we're doing for our kids are kind of coming in at our expense. And what this research shows is that doing something that's good for yourself is the way to take care of your kids. Okay, we have the power to change their outcomes by prioritizing our own well-being. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? The nights that you come home from work and you're a mess and you're stressed and you hate your boss and your commute and all this and that, and you walk through the door, that's the night things blow up in the house too. Like, that's just the way it works. And then it's when you're calm and you had a great day and everything's going well. And then your kids bring all the same crazy stuff to you that they did the night that you blew up. You can totally handle it because you have the bandwidth. Okay? So let's talk about what prioritizing your psychological well-being, what that means, because I think that's just a fancy term for managing your mind. And the first and largest category for that is learning to not believe your own worry. Okay? So many parents think that their worry is justified and necessary and just what parents do. Okay, that's almost part of the parental mythology, is that once you're a mom, you're never going to stop worrying about your kids. And that's not true, because I have. It doesn't mean that I'm not totally there for them and I'm helping them plan for things, but I don't worry about them in the way that so many parents worry about their kids. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of some particularly crazy stories that I've seen on Facebook lately from well-meaning parents who are just acting out of worry for their kids, and all of the ways that kind of that blows up for them. And then they're upset because they work so hard and try to make things so nice for their kids when they're not really seeing that the worry is hurting, not helping. Okay. And I just want to let you know, you can stop worrying before anything in your external world changes. Okay. The cost of college doesn't need to go down. The acceptance rates don't need to go up. Social media doesn't need to go away. Your kids don't have to start doing their assignments the day they're assigned instead of waiting till 10:30 the night before. Like, none of that needs to change. Stopping the habit of worrying is dependent on you learning to manage your mind. That means managing what you think about, not on the circumstances of your life. And that is really good news, because that means you can start right now before anything changes. And when you stop worrying, you are going to have such a better time as a parent. I have a reminder on my bulletin board that I've had up there for a long time. I'm looking at it right now. It's got a little pink star next to it. And it says, having a good time is a reasonable goal. And the research that I'm seeing about parental psychological well-being, like, that just backs up the idea that creating a home that's filled with fun and love is the best antidote to the pressure that so many of our kids experience when they leave our home. Your mental health matters. Your state of mind matters. The best thing that you can do for your child is to get your own anxiety about them under control. Actually, your own anxiety in general. Not by tamping it down, though, but by using the strategies we're talking about in these podcasts, by taking the information and then applying it to your daily family life. And if you need help doing that, if you need help seeing how to actually apply it, know that I'm right here. You can schedule a 60-minute free call where we're going to talk about exactly what's got you worried and what you can do right away to feel better. We're going to talk about how to take the information from these podcasts and put them to work in your daily life. And that is where all the magic happens. If you want to grab one of those free sessions, you can just send an email to parentingsuccessfulteens@gmail.com. It's just the name of the podcast @gmail.com. And all you have to do is put free call in the subject line. You don't even have to put anything in the body of the email. Just let me know that you would like to grab one of these free calls. And then I'll send you a link to my calendar, and then you can pick out a time that works for you. It's super easy. When the time comes to the call, we'll just hop on the phone and you'll tell me what's got you worried. We'll talk about your specific family situation, and then I will show you one thing you can start doing right away to feel better, to reduce your worry, and to start taking advantage of the effect that that will have on your family. Seriously, it's life-changing to have someone outside of your situation listen to what's going on and give you a fresh perspective. Got your back. I'm not worried. And on our call, I'm going to help you not to be worried either. All right, so send me an email, grab one of those free calls, and I will talk to you next week, everyone. Thanks for listening to Parenting Successful Teens. If you enjoyed today's show, then I've got a treat for you. I have a free guide that teaches you how to get your teenagers to tell you about their day. No more one-word answers. And grabbing this guide is super easy. Just text the phrase "Get Teens Talking" as all one word, no spaces, to the number 44222. So that's the phrase "Get Teens Talking" without any spaces to the number 44222. And then you'll be prompted to give the email address that you want the guide sent to, and then it shows up in your email box just like magic. You know what else is magic? Having teenagers that talk to you. Now, I can't promise that you're going to like everything they have to say, but I can promise better conversations. Grab the guide, and I'll talk to you next week.